I want to bring in AJ Bhatia, who is the CMO of Pier 1. This is hi AJ, where you're coming from LA, right?
Scottsdale. I actually just moved.
Oh, you're in. Oh, that's right, because
Yeah.
the parent company Rev is in Scottsdale, right?
No, we're actually based. We were kind of formed during the pandemic, so we're all over the place.
You're all over the place.
And yeah.
As many of you know, Pier 1 closed all of its retail stores by the third quarter of this year. Retail E-commerce Ventures, or REV, bought the IP and the data in July. That company has been collecting a number of struggling retailers like Modell's, Dress Barn, and most recently Radio Shack, with the aim of relaunching them first as D2C ventures. AJ is the CMO, was the CMO of Dress Barn, now is the CMO of Pier 1 brand, as it turned very quickly from a model almost wholly dependent on bricks and mortar to D2C. This kind of transition, we're obviously going to see a lot more of, and the kinds of processes that he's put in place to turn legacy brands into D2C friendly venues is really, I think, going to be relevant to almost everybody. So AJ, you had to relaunch Pier 1 as a digital-only e-tailer in a very short order. This all went down in July?
Yeah.
What did you learn? And the story of just the first thing was getting the right data, right? A brick and mortar, you had to go in and find out what's the data I can use in a D2C play here. So why don't you bring us back to that, bring us back to July and tell us what that migration looked like and what were the key things you were looking for, the key data that you were identifying?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because everything moves so fast when we did it. We had about 3 to 4 weeks from the sale closing to us relaunching the site. And everything that we acquired was just database. So we acquired the domain, the email list, all their ad accounts, all their product data and the customer data. And we flew into Fort Worth, Texas at the time, and we went through pretty much everything to take whatever we could. So it was kind of challenging at the time because they were in wind down period. So not everyone was there. No one really knew the answers. So it was a little bit of reverse engineering what they had. And we didn't acquire any of their software stack either. So we had to rebuild everything. So we had to throw everything up in our own ESP. We had to, find out whatever their engagement data was on their email. We had to figure out what cookies and what tracking and what interfaces they were using. We had to go in and figure out what ad accounts they were using, where they were located, and kind of reverse engineer and ask the right questions to see what they did.
What were the key consumer data points that you were after here? Again, keeping in mind, you were transitioning from a bricks and mortar centric brand into a digital focused brand. So what were the key data points in that customer set that were most important to you?
Yeah, so the biggest thing was on the email side. We wanted to know just the engagement data on the email because they essentially just dropped us a file of all of their entire list. So we had to break down what does this list consist of? Is it what is credit card data? What is the open data on this? What is your engaged segments? And kind of break down what is usable and what's not, who's opted into certain lists, who's not opted in. We did the same thing on the phone number side for text SMSs as well. And then going into Facebook, Google, and Bing and the affiliate side, we just had to go in and figure out what are those platforms were they using? What were they using them for? And how can we use their data going forward?
The initial way that the strategy came out here was to get at that existing customer base. That I want to get at that the basic strategy that you have in coming into a legacy brand like this, bringing it online, trying to pump up and essentially make it essentially a digital business, is you're starting with that core, right?
Yeah, exactly, and the awareness that's involved there.
What's the key difference there? Yeah, I mean, you've got a physical footprint, right? That 500 stores around the country, they're ever present. They're reminding people at every turn that the brand is there. So you lose that. And yet you've got those same customers. So how do you translate that into a digital brand awareness and brand retention program?
it was really interesting because, you know, when we acquired it, that time of the year, it's a very interesting time because most of the country was still on lockdown or had some sort of lockdown going on. And most customers, you know, like the whole transition happened extremely fast and it didn't look like a normal, like going out of business sale. So we had a chance to really own the messaging and get ahead of that messaging where in the past it's been a bit challenging. So because the whole wind down was extremely fast and most of the country was still in lockdown, it wasn't a long drawn out wind down process where there's this crazy going out of business sale and the stores were turned into liquidation outlets. I mean, there was some of that, but it wasn't as bad as it used to be. So we got ahead of the messaging, really owned the messaging across all social and display, like you mentioned earlier, and really wanted to get ahead of that messaging.
Well, bring us into that story. What was the media strategy here? You have to replace an old brick and mortar set of techniques and media channels for raising awareness with digital. So what was the digital translation of that? What was the plan?
Yeah, so going into it, you know, first few days we launched the site, we wanted to really ease into everything. So we started really small on budgets. We turned on just basic brand search. We turned on some basic Google shopping. And then we turned on some social ads, and then we got affiliate going, and just to test the waters, like during our soft launch, the first few days. And what we were running into was, you know, people were calling us out or of saying that, hey, the brand's closed. This isn't what's going on here. These are liquidated products or whatever. So there was a lot of confusion in that sense. And then there was also the point of confusion where people were really confused of, hey guys, I thought Pier 1 went out of business. So we put our heads together on what can we do to get ahead of this and what can we do to get the messaging out there that, hey, we've relaunched as a pure play e-commerce brand. And one thing that we did was a combination of, like, we put a lot of money behind awareness posts on paid social, specifically Facebook and Instagram, where we did an announcement post. And then we did that on display, where we basically saturated the entire, all the lists we had on display. And the biggest list was anyone that has ever purchased on the Pier 1 legacy site, as well as we had some in-store data that we saturated that list as well. To
you're using programmatic retargeting for most of this. You're re-identifying
exactly
customers. Let's look at let's pull up. We have some creative, so let's look at the messaging here.
Yeah, so it's really simple because we didn't want it to be confusing, or we didn't want to sell it. The whole goal here wasn't to sell product. It was just to get the messaging out that we're back and we're online, and we wanted to have that top of mind messaging. So in the future, when the customer's ready to buy a Papa share, or they're ready to buy some reed diffusers or whatever it is, we have that top of mind awareness. And it also serves as they've been seeing kind of the liquidation assets for a period of time. What can we do to kind of clean up the messaging? So our goal was really go as simple as possible and go as wide as we can with this messaging. And I think it worked, because after we did this, actually, we saw a lift in brand search as well. And we saw a pretty solid increase in traffic.
Let's look at the,
so
let's go to the next
simple.
slide.
It's,
let's look at more.
Yeah, this is what we did on social. Just very simple, clean imaging and very simple messaging.
And then
we tried to ease into that messaging, but then once we realized, when we got on like ahead of it, is when you know, it's the confusion was way less. We did the same messaging on email as well.
Let's go to the next slide. What's this next image?
This one I think is the most important piece of content that I think we put out. So we put this out on social, but we also leveraged like Facebook awareness campaigns for this one. And we put a lot of budget on this one, targeting a lot of our custom audiences: store buyers, store visitors, Pier 1 interest, and anyone that's really engaged with Pier 1 ads on Facebook and Instagram to get ahead of the messaging. And this one, I think it's one of our most engaged posts on organic social, and it's definitely our most engaged post on paid social.
What was the search strategy? What did the search strategy look like? Were you buying particular keywords? Were you buying shopper ads? How were you coming into search with this?
Yeah, so just you're talking generally, right? Not
Yeah.
Just yeah. So generally, the first thing we did is we analyzed what they used to do, and because we have access to their the legacy GA, and we had access to the legacy ad account as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we literally just turned on a lot of their best performers in the past just to keep those going, because they've been off during the transition. They turned them off like 2 or 3 months before we even got in. So what we wanted to do is they had all the answers for us. We didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We went in and turned on a lot of the legacy stuff that was the best performers, and then we iterated from there.
How did you, so were you going broad? Were you doing sort of general search, general keyword buying, or were you using a more precise strategy?
It was very broad in the beginning. It was very broad. What's that?
How did you manage costs?
On the cost side, our team just did a lot of manual bidding for the costs.
Mm-hmm. So you were really focused in the beginning on converting that Pier 1 list of existing customers, but what was the customer acquisition strategy? How did that take?
Customer acquisition strategy, one thing that we did heavily was Pier 1 has a lot of very specific products that are tried and true to Pier 1 that other brands in our space have, but they really stemmed and they're really notable to the Pier 1 side. So we really pushed those products as our key drivers on search, on paid search specifically. So like the Papasan chair is a high search volume, known to Pier 1. We have these reed diffusers that are very specific to Pier 1. A lot of room sprays and fragrances that are very specific to Pier 1, and we use those as drivers. And those specific products perform best for us on shopping.
And was that a strategy that was really bringing in new customers, or sort of reacquainting old customers, because they'd be recognizing the product, right?
It was a combo of both, or it is currently a combo of both.
So let's talk. But now you're also in a field where you're competing with the Wayfairs and the Overstocks.
Yep.
It's a different ball game. So how are you differentiating within this space now?
Yeah, it's challenging, because one thing that I've noticed is a lot of the products in the space are very similar. Like I just recently moved to Scottsdale, so I've been doing a lot of furniture and home shopping myself, and it's actually been pretty interesting because I've got to analyze like my own shopping habits in the process. And what I found out is like I've been searching on Pier 1, Wayfair, Overstock, Amazon, and all of them. And the funny thing is all sites have pretty much the same assortment of product, because there's key vendors in the space that really service everybody. So it comes down to one thing that we've been really heavy on is what can we do on a content strategy side to really set ourselves up? Because if everyone is selling the same products or similar products in design, it comes down to how are you able to merchandise these on the site? How are you able to give inspiration in the process? And how are you able to showcase those in a meaningful way? Because everyone is price competitive and everyone has crazy assortment. So it's what you do on the merchandising and inspiration side. And that's one thing that Pier 1 has done really well in the past, is they've been a source of inspiration and decor, home inspiration. So we've kept that going on. So we recently launched our blog, or relaunched the blog, and then we've been really focusing heavy on proper and like thorough photography, even for our non-owned inventory. So our drop shipped inventory specifically, where most companies aren't investing in creative for their non-owned inventory. We're actually going really heavy into that.
So that idea that you can use content to try to differentiate yourself online, to try to take some of that brick and mortar sense of experience, that unique experience of going into a Pier 1, a certain ambiance, a certain serendipity, and bring that and translate that into digital terms. That's what a lot of the content is about. But then that also extends into some of the relationships that you're exploring. You really heavied up on affiliates, right?
Yeah.
How did you squeeze more out of that channel? Because remember, we're going through a season now where everybody was heavying up on affiliates because they were really overperforming, especially as all this e-commerce was coming in. So what did you do to squeeze more performance out of that?
Yeah, we got really aggressive on our commission rates for the relaunch. So we went back to a lot of the, we had access to who were the top drivers on affiliate in the past. So I got on the phone with a lot of them with our affiliate team, and we put a bunch of bonus targets in place for them. And then we upped their commission percentage a little bit to incentivize them as well.
So it's interesting because you're taking a lot of these familiar channels and you're trying to find a way to do a kind of brick and mortar spin on a lot of these. You're trying to create special relationships, trying to create special content. It's interesting to me because there's all attempts to translate a brick and mortar experience a little more effectively into digital and to use a lot of these channels that we're familiar with in just a slightly different way.
Yeah, and then also we've been using certain affiliate channels that are kind of underserved a lot of times. So I know we're going to talk about influencer marketing, but we've been leveraging like reward style as well a little bit. And there's also some big email providers that we've been leveraging on the affiliate side.
So let's, since you raised it, I do want to talk. I also want to signal to the audience, if you have questions, please raise your hand. Lisa will get to you, or put a question into the chat window, and Lisa will read it off in a couple of minutes. We've mentioned social influencers. I really wanted to talk about that because I think you have an interesting take on how you're using social influencers. You have a plan for 2021, and you've made certain choices. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I think the way I think about influencers is there's really two ways to go about it. There's kind of like that peanut butter spread method where you go super wide and you kind of do, you get as many influencers as you can to promote the brand. It's kind of like the Fashion Nova, approach where they try to saturate Instagram and go about it that way. And then there's kind of the other method that's a little more curated, that picks like a handful of influencers that are relevant to the brand and the brand story. Also can do an extended piece of content and be more brand ambassadors over just influencers. And one approach that we're doing is in the next, Q1, late Q1, early Q2, one thing we're going to do is we're rolling out a influencer program that goes for the more curated story-based telling, influencers that bleed Pier 1 and have already have an aesthetic that's similar to Pier 1. And we're going to be doing commercials around them, as well as do website features and then curated collections on the website to go deeper into the storytelling, rather than finding 1,000 influencers and slapping a coupon code on their page.
Why do you think depth beats breadth?
I think in this age, people value authenticity and people value storytelling. And I think at this point in time, people can tell if it's just a one-off paid for post. And to me, and I think to this demographic, it has a sense of being disingenuine, that they're kind of buying a shout out versus this is a strategic partnership. Kind of, we believe in the brand, and we're both, both the brand is supporting the influencer and this influencer is supporting the brand. I think goes a lot further.
I want to put a pin in that theme of depth over breadth, and using these digital and performance channels to tell deeper and richer and different stories as one of the ways to come at this. But I want to bring in some questions because I think we have some from the audience. Lisa.
Yes, we do. Well, Annie, of course, has a question. Take it away, Annie.
Hi. So it seems like you're leaning like super heavily into the influencer space. Is that going to continue into 2021, or are you going to kind of dial it back a little bit?
Yeah. So are you referring to any specific campaign that you've seen, or just general off?
Just based on what you just said, it just seems like it's super heavy, which makes sense in a pandemic. But I just don't know if you're going to go back to maybe like a paid search strategy or something else. Cause yeah.
So we're going to dial it back. But like I said, we're just going to be working with like a handful of influencers. And one thing that we do leverage is we repurpose all the content onto paid social that we do with the influencers. So not only just having their organic posts with influencers, we get the rights to repurpose the content, make like sort of commercials or short bits, and we repurpose that on YouTube pre-rolls and then on specific ads.
Okay.
So that's kind of more of the strategy, and I think that's more powerful. Is also another thing we're doing with the influencers is we target their audiences as well. So sometimes we could either run it through their account. I haven't done this specifically with Pier 1, but that's what I want to do in Q1, Q2. I've done this with Dress Barn a few times, is we run specifically through the influencer's account and have ads running through there on paid social and target their audiences, and then have the links direct specifically to our website.
Okay,
great.
And you see a lot. One brand that's doing that right now, I forget, is that the fitness clothing brand. They've been doing a lot with Kevin Hart, I've been seeing, and it's been working pretty good, where they have for some, I think it's Athletics.
Brand partnership with Kevin Hart.
What's that? Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So Fabletics does that a lot. They're doing little snippets with Kevin Hart, and then they're running it through his Instagram page, and then they're driving it to a Fabletics collection page.
Okay.
I think that's kind of like the new model of influencers.
I think we've got another question.
Yeah, you have Jim Parsons.
Hey, AJ, how are you, man?
Good. How are you?
Hey, good to talk to you again. Hey, question for you. Since you came from the outside of Pier 1, there must have been a little bit of a process to really get down a feel for the audience and to really develop the persona as you thought it ought to be for a digital first brand. Can you kind of take us through the process a little bit? I'd like to understand that better.
Yeah. So every brand has that different persona. One thing that we were blessed with is we had the ability to hire some people from Legacy Pier 1. So one of the couple of the people we hired were specifically in the marketing department that worked on copywriting and design and so on, to keep that look and feel. And I think that was one of the most important things that we were able to do to make sure that when we came in, it didn't feel like it was totally different. Because that's like the last thing you want. It's like when your favorite restaurant was bought out by new ownership and you go in and your favorite item on the menu tastes differently. We wanted to keep the authenticity and kind of the look and feel. So we made a point to hire some key individuals that had their hand in it in the past.
I'm gonna steal one more question. Because I think it's really interesting that you're working within this larger holding company that has multiple brands. Obviously, the Pier 1 strategy that you talked about very much is a digitization of an in-store experience that I think those of us who shopped at Pier 1 recognize. It makes sense: depth, quality of content, richness of experience. So when you pivot now into a Radio Shack, which your holding company just bought, how does that strategy look different when it comes to digitizing that brand?
Yeah, Radio Shack's going to be interesting because one thing that Pier 1 has specifically is everyone knows what it looks like and what it feels like, and it's very digestible. Radio Shack is kind of, everyone has a different idea of what Radio Shack is, and it's had many different iterations over the years. So one thing that's going to be the most important is, what does this product strategy look like on Radio Shack, and how do we really drive that home? So I think Radio Shack has like a massive potential to carry unique and very viral style electronics products, everything from drones to different cameras and cool, at-home fitness devices and things like that. I think Radio Shack has like a really solid place to compete, as well as, Radio Shack still has a lot of top of mind awareness in terms of like batteries and some, cables and just very basic at-home needs. So I think curating a collection that has both what has been tried and true in the past, as well as recreating kind of a storytelling piece around product, I think will be massive for it.
AJ, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing in 6-9 months coming back and seeing how this strategy performed.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I want to, not to interrupt, but we do have a question on chat.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go, please.
Is it okay? Jeff, are you still there? Jeff Alderman?
Hey, yes, I'm here. Yeah, quick. Just
go ahead, Jeff. Sorry to step on you there.
No worries. Just quick question, AJ. So obviously, Rev has a lot of great brands in the portfolio, and so just kind of curious, how well you guys communicate cross brands as far as sharing playbooks and best practices, test and learns, where the mines are in the minefield type thing as well. So just kind of curious how well you guys communicate as far as like speed to data and learnings.
That's a great question. We do a lot of like collaboration. The biggest thing is we have a team that's kind of shared as well. So we have dedicated teams, and then we have like rev level teams that work. And then also one thing that I do is I actually share a lot of the insights and learnings across brand, because I was at Dress Barn and now I'm at Pier 1. I'm also going to dabble into Radio Shack. So the speed is actually really fast, and we have like shared Slack channels and shared WhatsApp channels and so on, where we are collaborating every single day. So we do weekly calls with the broader team, and then we do kind of a bi-weekly calls with the internal side of each team.
Cool.
So we do that in real time, and that's kind of like the biggest and best asset we have is that shared resource, sharing both software resources, ad insights, creative insights. It's probably the most helpful thing we have.
Well, thanks. And thanks, Jeff, and thanks, AJ, very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, AJ.
Thank you. Appreciate it.